Welcome to another episode of Comedy Wham Presents with me, your host Valerie, and my sometime co-host Miss Purrington is back at home. We're on location for this interview. ComedyWham.com is your place to go for features about all Austin comedy. You can keep up with us on Twitter and Instagram at Comedy Wham or on our Comedy Wham Facebook page. If you're listening to this podcast, please rate and review us on iTunes. In addition to podcasts, Comedy Wham brings you articles, album reviews, and live shows featuring the best in Austin comedy in all its shapes and formats. Launched in 2016, the Podcast Project brings you funny people and their stories. As a fan, I like to delve into a comic's background and motivations, and will usually take a detour along the way. Consider the interview a way for you to get to know the folks that make the Austin comedy scene one of the best in the country. Today, we're sitting down with somebody who's been on all the great shows in Austin, from Sure Thing, to Punch, to Piranha, to Schitt's Golden, Live at Cold Town, just to name a few. I recently saw him host for Gareth Reynolds at Cap City, and then again recently at the Altercation Festival this year. He is the longtime host of Ground Floor, a show he created in 2016 at Hotel Vegas, and he just launched Beamed In with Andrew Wagner at Spider House Ballroom. And a lot of us who follow him on Facebook like to watch his automotive adventures.
Yeah.
And hot off the presses, because I like to do my topical research, I want to find out why our guest last night was called a centipede wrangler.
A centipede wrangler. Yeah. It was Wagner that actually said it. We were at Chortle Portal, the underground.
Yeah, the Taos Cooperative.
Yeah, great show. And Wagner was co-hosting, and he was riffing about a bit how, when he moved in with me, that when he got in here, there were centipedes around. We had like a centipede problem. And he made the joke of like, oh, I don't know if this is an infestation or if this is part of Taylor's aesthetic. And I was like, okay. And then I think Clarkston called me a centipede wrangler or something.
Oh, there we
go.
go.
I like hearing what people, they always have different adjectives to describe me, so I like it.
Well, very good. Now you've heard his voice, and you know that it's time for Comedy Wham Presents our guest, Taylor Dowdy.
That's me.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Or I guess thank you for hosting me.
Oh, let me say it. Welcome to my creepy apartment.
No, I mean, the first thing walking in, and maybe, I don't want anybody to get any wild ideas, but your album and, dare I say, very current DVD collection.
Yeah. She might be referring to my VHS collection.
It's VHS? Oh my God, that's right. Oh.
And all those on the wall are VHS as well. These are just the horror movies.
I didn't even see that.
Yeah, this section here's just the
Holy
horror
cow.
movies.
Wow. Okay. Well, maybe after I'm going to have to get some inspiration, because I've recently gotten into horror movies.
Oh man.
So
I've been on that wacky train for years.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love it.
Oh, I'm so glad. For a long spell, I wasn't getting out to see a lot of comedy, and that meant that for a lot of my recent guests that I'm doing interviews with, I haven't seen them perform for a while, and that includes you. But then I was really lucky to get to see you host for Gareth Reynolds, and I was actually at that show to see his feature, Andy Forster.
I love Andy.
I loved Andy when he came through last year.
Yeah.
And I was surprised that comes off wrong. I was surprised to see you, but mostly because I hadn't seen you in a while, and you were like so good.
Oh, thanks.
And then seeing you again at Altercation, I'm like, oh my God, there's something that seems like so strong about...
I'm the last person in the world to give myself a compliment, so I don't know what you're referring to. But I will give myself limited credibility and just say that, like, I've done nothing else but comedy, and that includes going to like 6 mics a week on top of the shows and the shows that I host, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't know. It probably just a manifestation of
hard work,
getting a lot of stage time. Actually, yeah. I mean, hard work, I guess. That's a relative term in comedy, I think, but like, I guess it is.
Well, I mean, hosting shows, adding shows that you're hosting, and then the mics, and it just seemed like in the gap, not that you weren't strong the last times I've seen you, but last times I've seen you have typically been at open mics where you're working stuff out. It's not necessarily, okay, I've got a paid crowd here.
Right.
I'm going to put on my A game. So I think maybe that was what was happening is I'd been seeing you at open mics, working stuff out.
Yeah.
And then I see you where you've brought your A game. I'm like, damn, his A game is good.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. That happens a lot with folks. I do the same thing. I'll see somebody and I'm like, yeah, it's not for me, or it's, they're not quite there yet. And then like maybe a week later, I see they're on the same lineup with me or something. I'm like, oh. Yeah. And then I have to remind myself, I'm like, oh yeah, the open mic is that's a whole different animal. Like I get it.
Yeah.
It's not, I'm not taking it as a slide, I promise.
Yeah. Okay. Well, very good. Well, we with that introduction of me just gushing and forcing you to accept compliments.
Please gush away.
We're going to do our official icebreaker.
Okay.
Which is one word to describe your past.
My past? Whew. Tumultuous.
Tumultuous. And anybody that has seen you on stage gets a flavor of that.
I hope so. I really do. When I first started doing comedy, I was doing this weird thing where I would manufacture material. I would just like come up with a weird story and try to like make it funny or make a joke. And then over the course of like the last couple of years, I've realized that my real life is more than enough material to comment on. It just isn't funny to me. Yeah. You know what I mean? A lot of these things that like I delve into in my act now, when I sat down and thought about it, I'm like, that's not funny. That's just a tragedy. But like I've gotten better at comedy, I think, and better at writing, and I've honed my brain into being able to like process stuff in a comedic way rather than just reminiscing.
Yeah.
So.
And anybody, I didn't put it in the introduction because I figured it was going to come up, but anybody that sees you on stage, you wear on your sleeve very much that you're from Wyoming. Yep. Which is a state that you joke nobody knows about.
It's true.
And it's true, especially Texans. We don't absorb geography.
If Texans find out somebody else is wearing a cowboy hat, they want nothing to do with it. It's very funny.
So we know where you grew up. Aside from apparently by being in here, I get that music and movies are probably very important to your growing up life. How
you would be surprised at how not true that is.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
Okay.
So anything that I am into or have delved into and sort of tried to like make part of myself, 0% of that is from the ages of 0 to 18.
Oh.
Anything I know about or talk about or think about or love is after 18 years old.
Okay. All right.
It's a very strange a couple of years, but yeah.
So I'll throw this question out at you. So do you have early comedic memories?
Actually, I do. Yeah. So I guess being a little kid, I remember this guy, Peck. That's what they called him. Okay. I think his real name was Morgan, something. And he was like a year older than I was. And I was like 8 or 9. And everybody loved Peck. And it took me about 10 seconds to realize why. Because he was funny. He was like off the cuff. And he was just like, like I wouldn't describe him as the class clown. But he was definitely like, he played football. He was like the basketball not coach. What's the captain? Whatever.
Oh, okay.
Do basketball teams have captains? Who's to say? But he was also funny, and I really remember seeing that going, man, I wish I could be like that. I wish I was funny like that. And then, weirdly enough, my parents were into comedy, but only a weird fraction. And I mean like the blue collar stuff.
Okay.
And Rodney Carrington and yeah, so like I remember growing up and my mom playing a Jeff Foxworthy, You Might Be a Redneck. I think it's from 92, 93, that album.
Sounds about, yeah.
It's the highest selling comedy album of all time. And I remember her playing it for me, not for me, but like for her friends and stuff, like in the car and stuff. And I just was like, this is fun. I like whatever this is. And even now, like I don't mind Jeff Foxworthy. I mean, he's not like a huge influence, but I do remember thinking like, oh, this is a cool thing. Never would have thought that I was going to do it, but yeah, those are my early comedy memories, I suppose.
And did you seriously have a thought to, I want to do this one day?
Never.
Okay.
No, that thought didn't come until college, probably. But, the slow build up from being a little kid and like recognizing that humor is valuable. Mm-hmm. It truly is. And the slow build up, like, okay, high school and stuff, I knew nobody. But the second I left Wyoming and got to Texas to go to college is when I started like really picking up. This is like 2006, 2007. So like comedy albums were like still something that you could like when Patton Oswalt put out Werewolves and Lollipops, that was a big thing. Mm-hmm. And I bought it, and I had Greg Giraldo, I had Lewis Black, I had the big one is Mitch Hedberg. Like as soon as I found his 2 albums, I was like, wow, this guy. Because in my limited comedy perspective, it was like, yeah, like Lewis Black, Greg Giraldo, and then this weird dude, Hedberg, comes along, and I'm just like, oh, this is on another planet. And I loved it.
Yeah. And you went to college?
At Western Texas College in Snyder, Texas.
No idea where any of these things are.
Nope. Nobody should. They don't know where they are. Snyder's a small town about an hour south of Lubbock, and that college, that community college, was purchased by Texas Tech University out of Lubbock. So the transfer process was seamless. So when I went there, I ended up going to Texas. I know we're jumping ahead a little bit, but
all right. So you're immersing yourself in comedy, and has the wild hair started to creep in yet that you want to do this?
Or
what did you study, by the way?
Art.
Okay.
Yeah, fine art. I was painting emphasis, poetry minor.
Okay.
Which I guess makes sense. It doesn't. I was 22, and I was listening. This is such a weird story. I was in the painting studio at Western Texas College, and they had like a studio CD player, and I had Hedberg's Mitch Altogether playing, and a friend of mine came into the room, and she was crying because a friend of hers had just recently committed suicide. Now, this isn't. Let me emphasize, this isn't going to be funny, but this is where it started. She said, "Oh my God, my friend did this," and I was like, "Oh, that sucks." And I was listening to Hedberg, and I was like, you know what? What if I put on a comedy show to benefit this person's family because it's a friend of mine? Oh. So the art department was directly adjacent to the theater department. So I went to the theater director and I said, "Hey, I have this idea about putting on a stand-up comedy show." And they're like, "Well, who's going to perform?" And I was like, "I guess I will." So they gave me the date, and the date was like a month ahead. So for that month, I wrote 45 minutes of like Mitch Hedberg-esque material. I wrote like one-liners, stuff like that, and I taped it like a special. I named it because I didn't know what an open mic was. I didn't know that there are tiers to this. I only thought comedy existed like on television. Like I was like, "Oh, that's stand-up comedy. That's how you do it." So I was just like, "Oh, so you have to write an hour, you have to name it, you have to tape it, you have to make posters." So I did all of that without knowing that that's a weird move.
The innocence of not knowing anything.
Yeah, it was a weird. I still have that DVD from 2006 when I did like 45 minutes of very Hedberg-like material. Now, I will give myself credit enough to be like, I wrote those jokes. Like I wrote them, but even my aesthetic, I dressed like a hippie. Like I did this whole weird thing. I had the theater department paint a big peace sign on the stage. It was a weird thing to do. But that was when I first was like, "Oh, maybe I can do this." Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until a few years after that people were telling me, "Hey man, you're pretty good at writing jokes, but you gotta stop doing the Hedberg thing because that's what he does, right?" And they were telling me like, "You're a good storyteller. Like you can, just talking to you, you've got good stories." And I didn't ever have the confidence to break out of writing the one-liner stuff. Sorry, I feel like I'm dominating this conversation.
Taylor, this is actually what this podcast is about.
I feel like I'm talking too much. And the shoes I were wearing where, one shoelace was broken half, and just giving you details that make no sense.
How did you feel when you were done with that show?
So it's one of those things where 45 of my moms showed up. What I mean is like only my friends showed up. And so everything I said, they were just like, wow, they just loving it. And I felt like, oh, I'm a comedian now. Yeah. That's what it is. And being in a small, dusty West Texas town, I mean, there were no bars to do open mics. There was a comedy club called Froggy Bottoms in Lubbock at that time. And a friend of mine had gone there or knew somebody there. To some effect, he had a connection there. And he was like, I'm going to get you in there. And I was like, oh my God, it's happening. And then shortly after that, comedy club just closed. And I don't even think it was like a legit club. I think it was just like a room in some cafe around the corner. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I felt like, okay, I found what I'm going to do. And since that time, believe it or not, of all the stuff that has happened to me since then, ups, downs, whatever, comedy was always there. Like in my head, I'm like, I'm going to be a comedian. Going to be a comedian. I just never had the gall or the confidence to actually pursue it. It wasn't until like almost 6 years ago that I was just like, let's do it. Come on, what are we waiting on?
Yeah.
So that's when I moved here.
Okay, so you got the inspiration to pursue it, and that meant moving to here as opposed to what was it about here, other than the Superior City and
Superior City? Yeah. So living in Texas, I mean, I moved. So all my moves have been exponentially better. Like I went from Upton, Wyoming, 700 people, to Snyder, Texas, 12,000 people, to Lubbock, 200,000. So I was slowly working my way up to bigger and bigger cities. At that time, I don't think I would have had the confidence or the tenacity to really hit New York or really hit LA.
Yeah.
And since then, I've heard many of my favorite comedians tell me, or not tell me, but like on a podcast, that they wish they would have started in a smaller scene and developed and then moved to a bigger scene. Now, who's to say whether or not they actually believe that, or you know, things would have turned out very differently for everybody.
Different schools of thought.
Yeah,
you could sink or swim if you just force yourself to go into.
Sure,
those.
And I don't think Austin's much different in that way. I mean, you have to be funny, no matter where you're going to be. But living in Texas, people always talked about Austin, not for its the comedy scene, just as a city in general. And this is how I'm really going to show my colors here, because this is going to be really gross what I'm about to say.
Oh, no.
When I was living in Lubbock, I'd heard that Austin's an amazing city, but I thought only New York and LA had comedy scenes. That's what I thought. And I was like telling myself, okay, Austin's probably got I did my research. I Googled it. I'm like, oh, they got a couple of comedy clubs. What are the chances they've got more than 10 comedians? There's probably not more than 10. So this is what I did. And anybody who listens to this, you can roast me for this. I deserve it. I knew that Doug Stanhope had taped a special at the Velveeta Room in 2004. So I emailed Doug, and I said, hey, man, fellow comedian here. I'm going to move to Austin. I know that maybe you got some connections at the Velve. Could you do me a favor and email and let them know I'm coming?
Oh,
and just saying that, I just want to like walk out into traffic. But again, to my limited credibility, it took me 3 days of being here going, I'm an idiot. What was I thinking? Because when I moved here, I saw everybody. Yeah. I mean,
which year did you move here?
I moved here literally January 1st, 2014.
Okay. All right.
And I saw Daniel Webb. I saw Raul Sanchez, Danny Palumbo, Mac Blake. Yeah. All these great comics. And I was just like, oh, okay. I'm going to shut up. And if there were only... Here's an invention that they need to come up with. Somehow to retrieve an email and make sure nobody gets it. That's what you should do. Google. Get on it.
I assume you never got a response.
No, not on that one. I have since emailed Doug before and gotten responses, but he's just good about that. He's really oddly in touch with his fans. So No, I never got one from that. And I've seen him a couple of times, never brought it up. And I've spoken to people that have ran into him, and they're just, I think they're trying to be nice, but like, believe me, man, he probably didn't even read it or see it. I'm like, but what if he did? What if he did? I'm the biggest douchebag in comedy, man. This sucks. But yeah, that's what I did. And I got here and I was just like, oh, I'm a fool. It's ridiculous.
So how did you approach once you realize, oh, there's more than 10 and there's open mics? Because your credit was, hey, I've got a special.
Yeah, God.
So how did you actually learn about comedy and being a comic?
2014, up until that time, I was like 20. How old was I? 26, 27 at that time? So I was a little late in the game as far as getting started. Mm-hmm. Not I wasn't 50, but, I mean, a little late compared to some of the people that we know. But I listened to enough podcasts and watched enough interviews. I was obsessed. I had a job at Texas Tech University in a computer lab where nobody checked in on me. I spent most of my college career studying comedy without knowing it really. But I would just listen to podcasts and watch specials and interviews and all this stuff. And the one thing that I got out of listening to all of my heroes was stage time. Get on stage as often as you can. Good, bad, outside, inside, doesn't matter. Get comfortable being on stage with a microphone in your hand. So when I moved here, aside from emailing Doug Stanhope, on the flip side of that coin, I had a good bit of advice in my head, which was just get on stage. Yeah. And I learned that this scene had so much stage time to give. And just outside the open mics, there was tons of shows to do. Now, of course, me being me, I was a little dreary. I was in a relationship that I shouldn't have been in for too many years. So I was a little down, still had no confidence. I was just pretty depressed. And so my idea of doing comedy in this city was pretty slow. I did do a lot of mics. I didn't know anybody, and I kept my mouth shut. And so I think early on I developed like this weird reputation of being like a creepy guy in the corner. Rightfully so. Because things didn't really come together for me for a few years. Like I was dressing in all black. I just like sat in the corner and lurked. And like when I got on stage, I wasn't energetic and I wasn't having fun because I just gotten out of this relationship. I'm in a city that I don't know anybody. I didn't have a job really. Like it was a tough start, but I kept going to mics. And I think if you're a new person hitting a comedy scene, that's what you got to do. Mm-hmm. If you're going to try to do this for real, and for real is a relative term, of course, but for me, being a real comic means you work every night. You do it in any capacity. Yeah. Like last night, I went and hung out at a show, and they're like, hey, do you want to do a spot? I'm like, thank God. I got to do a spot tonight. Stage time is valuable. Even now, it's like I'll almost be 6 years in, and I still get upset at myself when I don't get on stage. I get mad. I'm just like, oh, what am I doing? I'm wasting my time. I'm being lazy. Don't be lazy. So, yeah.
Wow. Okay. So, a couple of things that I want to follow up on. One is, it's funny that you say you were, the creepy guy lurking, because now whenever I walk into, when I've gone to open mics and I see you there, you're like there's a nexus, and you're usually part of that nexus. So it's kind of cool that, that through the hard work and being part of the scene, hosting a show, you obviously get to know the comics that are in the scene. Yeah. And people are clustering towards you now.
I guess. If that's true, I haven't noticed that. I only contradict that by saying I kind of don't like people around me, which is, so if that's true, then they're my very close friends, and then you're probably correct. But I do find myself like, and this happens to much better comics than me, and people who've been doing it way longer. New comics, you know, they think that you're a person that can make something happen for them. So they try to approach you. And I have no qualms in saying it. I'm not very approachable. And that's kind of by design, I guess. I don't know. I get it, though. When I first started, and most of my friends when they started, nobody talked to them. Nobody gave them the time of day. Yeah. And oddly enough, as mean and sort of as frat house as that sounds, that's kind of part of it. Yeah. It's so many people come and go. And I take great pleasure and I'm very proud of the friend group that I've developed. I love my friends. They're everything to me. So I'm not going to give this person, hey man, what's up? And give them, I'm not that guy.
Yeah.
Because in 2 weeks, that person may be gone.
Right.
In 3 weeks, in 4 weeks, in 2 months. So if there are people clustering around me, it's people that I know very well.
Yeah.
So
that makes sense. I'd rather have one or two super close, deep friendships than a million, acquaintances.
Yeah. And I'm just kind of a grumpy dude. So
Well, you've been very delightful to me so far.
Oh, thanks.
So.
Yeah, I've gotten better. I'm trying to get better. I don't know. The sun's shining, right?
So when did you discover that you had to stop being somebody else on stage?
I think, I don't know. One could even make the argument that I'm not even myself yet. I've heard far more successful comics mention that, where it's like, oh, it takes 8 years to find yourself, to find your voice. I'd like to think I'm a little closer than that, but I don't know. I don't have any recollection of moving here and still doing Hedberg. I can remember some of the jokes that I was doing when I first started, and they were story-esque. They were, so I was kind of already, flushing that one-liner stuff, that Hedbergian persona off, and I was trying to work on something else, but it wasn't quite there, as it shouldn't have been. I was new, so pretty early on, it was pretty early on that I was like, you got to be yourself, whatever that means. And that's part of the fun about being a comic. If you're really into it and you're really delving into it and putting the work in, you get to find out who you are for real. And I've learned that about myself, because for the first 26 years of my life, I hated who I was. I didn't have any confidence. And then comedy gave me this ability to discover who I am. And I like who I am now. And it's like, oh, I'm this guy? This isn't half bad. I could have easily been the guy who climbed the clock tower. I could have been that guy. Oh, no. And I'm so glad I'm not.
Oh, no.
Yeah. Comedy gave me that opportunity to find out who I was. And it turns out I'm not so bad.
Yeah.
Not great, but I'm not as creepy as people might have thought.
Well, watching you perform those last two times that I've seen you, and the comment that my friend made about your style of comedy, and I will go back to a time where I was at an open mic with you, and I was in that. Okay, I can only eavesdrop because I wasn't in the Nexus. So now I understand why I wasn't in the Nexus.
Yeah,
but that's not the point.
Yeah.
I remember you talking about Aaron Brooks and a compliment that he paid you that I could tell you were like, oh my God.
Aaron's one of the greatest stand-ups I've ever seen in my life.
And so I have to tell you, and I don't say this very lightly, because Aaron Brooks to me is a god of storytelling.
He is.
And it's all his life.
Yep.
You have an Aaron Brooks storytelling ability.
Woo!
That is.
You heard that, Aaron?
All right.
I'm coming for you. No.
Calm down. Tim.
Yeah.
And that's, it's hard to think, because on the drive here, I was trying to think, okay, well, I don't want to get the inflated ego about that comment.
Right. Believe me, there's no ego here.
I'm trying to think of other comics in the scene that just seem to have this natural ability to paint a very intricate and visual image in our minds as an audience and have it come off so naturally. And I know you've worked hard for it.
Yeah,
but
It's interesting. Somebody just the other night, a newer person, was running their notes by me, and they do the same thing I still do, and I write my stuff word for word. So, in a sense, it's a script, and I was more scripted when I started. I've gotten better at breaking away from it when I'm on stage. Like I can kind of dip in and out of my material and like interact with whatever's happening. But this new comic was doing the same thing. She was writing her stuff out, and she said, "I want to be like you. I want to come off natural." And look, I hate compliments. I can't. I don't know what to do with them. But I was honest with her, and I said, "Look, anything that you see me do up there, down to like a hand movement, I thought about it. There's nothing natural about what I'm doing.
Yeah. If
it comes off natural, that's because I've been pretending to be natural for 6 years. Yeah. Like, there's nothing natural about what I'm doing. Aaron, I think, is a natural-born dude who has lived a weird life, like me, and just has this inherent ability to, like you said, paint a very vivid picture. Mm-hmm. And there's other comics in the scene that when I moved here, and I still look up to. Mac Blake is another person that... Gosh, yeah. I think, like me, he doesn't like compliments, so I won't gush too hard. But between him and Aaron, man, if you can literally learn a ton about comedy, just watching those two guys. And I did, and I watched them, and I thought, okay, if I'm going to be a comic, I at least need to be trying to do something that they're doing, which is painting a picture. And there's a comic from Ireland. His name is Dylan Moran, who is my all-time favorite comedian. And he has this insane ability to literally paint a picture. He does this weird thing where he'll do illustrations throughout his show, and he'll have them projected behind him while he's doing comedy. And the illustrations have nothing to do with the bits that he's talking about. But they're these weird visual elements, and his style of writing and his style of speaking, so vivid. Patton Oswalt's another guy that just... All these guys have this like really cool ability to, put you in a place in your mind where you're like, man, I see, he's giving me the color of the building. Just all these weird details that, like, I don't know, most comics don't think about doing. Yeah. So.
What gave you the idea and inspiration to start Ground Floor 3 years ago?
That starting, I don't know.
And I know that was an abrupt
no
change there, but
I'm trying to think. Best way to put it. When I got here, all the best comics in town had their own shows. Mm-hmm. They all had their own spots. And so, me not knowing any better, I thought, well, that's what you do. If you want to be a person and you want to be better at comedy, look what these guys are doing. You got to do that. Yeah. So, up until that point, I'd been here for 2 years. And I had the wherewithal to know that I wasn't ready to start a show my first year in or my second year in. Uh-huh. But the opportunity came because my friend Jared McCorkle, who was an Austin comic, lives in New York now, knew the manager at Hotel Vegas. And there used to be an open mic there. A couple of comics who are still around ran a mic there. So they've had comedy there. So McCorkle emailed his friend, and his friend was like, yeah, we could try something. Mm-hmm. So believe it or not, me and McCorkle were supposed to co-host that together. And he was a new guy in the scene. He was really busy doing a lot of shows, so he was never able to co-host it with me. So it just worked. He worked himself out of the co-hosting job. And so it just became me. And yeah, at that time, the name of the place, if you've ever been to Hotel Vegas, you know what it looks like. If you haven't, they've since upgraded it. But it's kind of a weird neon Victorian, I don't know. It's a very weird spot. It's a famous like music spot in Austin. But finding that venue, starting that show, aligned with me figuring out my visual aesthetic and sort of my writing style. Huh. All that came together around the same time. So my visual aesthetic matched the Hotel Vegas aesthetic. And I really liked that. Mm-hmm. I just didn't see anybody else matching their venue. Not that you should, but if it's just a weird thing that took place. And since then, many people have been like, nobody else could host a show there. Nobody else should host a show there. And I was like, okay. Well, you can if you want, but that show has since become something that I'm really proud of, because there's a lot of shows in town. A lot of them don't stick around.
Right.
A lot of them do. My show has stuck around, and slowly but surely, I'm beginning to get more and more people asking to do it. Whether that's by word of mouth, I don't know. But for the past almost 2 years, we have packed it out with 80 plus folks.
Wow.
Every month. So it's become a show that I think comics want to do, and that's the best you can hope for, is a guy, or as a person rather, hosting a show in a relatively small scene. It's like, oh, I have a show that people want to do. That's great. Right. That's what you want. And
you get out of town names who come for this show too.
That happens. We've had a couple of cool folks on, and again, that's not rare. I mean, our scene's pretty well known, I think, nationally. So we've got a lot of folks coming through. But to be a show that people, again, want to do, and people hit me up from out of town, and I'm like, come on through, man. Come do it. So I never would have thought that show would be as good as it is now. I remember sitting down with a couple of folks and getting notes. Like, I want my show to be better. This is like the first year. I was like, I want my show to be better. I want it to be as good as it possibly can. Because that's another thing that folks do, is they'll start 2 shows, 3 shows, 4 shows. There are folks that have that many. And it's like, why don't you just
put it all into one?
Put it all into one. Make that one just the show. Mm-hmm. And if it gets to the point where you can't make it any better, it's reached its peak, and it's maintaining that, then go off and start something else. I always had that thought. I wanted Hotel Vegas and Ground Floor to be as good as it possibly can be. Mm-hmm. I think it's close. Yeah. I don't know.
So what did you learn as a host that helped you become the better performer too? I mean, you said that it all kind of clicked into place at once, but I'm curious of what specific types of things that by hosting this show and knowing that you wanted to be around for a while with that show.
Maybe I'm not the best person to ask about how hosting a show has made me better, because there are hosts that utilize that time far better than I do. And I mean, they'll use it for riffing and developing that stage comfortability.
Sure.
For a long time, I didn't. I just went up there and did my material and tried to warm the crowd up as best I could. That's not the best technique. It really isn't. As a host, you want to get the crowd involved. You want to make them feel like this is a comedy show. Like, okay, if they talk to us, that's fine. I didn't do that. I just went up there. Hi. So the other day, I did this. So I'm getting better at utilizing that time in that space. But I will say, the big benefit for me about hosting that show was being able to book people that, in my mind, were unbookable. I was like, oh, there's no way that person would come to my show. Yeah. And I ask them, and they do. So I get to develop these lineups of people that I want to see, people that that I look up to, and I give I try to be around as often as I can. Naturally, just by being around for so many years, there are places I don't go. There are open mics I don't attend, so I don't get to see everybody all the time. But I try to pay attention. So I give those folks spots on the show as well, and I get to see how they interact with a large crowd. And how are they going to do following a person who just absolutely murdered? Yeah. How are they going to do that? So it's fun to be able to give people those opportunities. And
you're studying. You're still studying.
I still am, yeah. I still watch, and I'm like, okay, how's that person? Again, I'll drop his name one more time, and I won't mention it again. When I have Mac on my show, he is so good at just dipping in and out of his material. He'll go into his act, and then he'll react to somebody walking through the door, or just watching somebody like that handle a room and really put his hands on all 4 corners of the space. It's fun to watch. But yeah, that's what I've learned hosting that show is Yeah, I get to invite people to come to a show. Now I could see them. I could go to some other show and watch them, but they came to my show. They said yes when I asked them to do my show. That meant everything. So yeah.
So I've picked on 2 times that I've seen you. What is the most exciting thing that you've gotten to do in 2019?
I would say hosting for Gareth, and the reason I say that is because I was a huge fan of his podcast. I would just listen to it for not a long time, but like a year. I was a fan, and then that was fun to meet that guy, and he's so cool.
And as far as the making the sausage part of the business, getting to host at Cap City is a big deal in terms of the progression that somebody makes. And how was that your first time?
No, it was my third.
Okay, so you're in the door with that role.
Yeah. They trust me enough to give me a spot every now and again. Cap City's. I mean, it's unarguably one of the best clubs in the country. Yeah. Now, I can't say that as a person who's been to every comedy club in the country, but I take the word of other comedians who do know. So I've heard plenty of people who's got limitless credibility say, it's one of the best clubs in the country. So it's cool to live here and be a local and be able to be part of that in whatever small way I am. I'm happy to be part of that. So,
and what are you looking forward to down the road?
Who knows? I mean, when I first started, there was local shows that I just in my head thought I'll never do that show. Then you do it, and then you do it again, then you do it again, and so these little goals, you meet them, and then you put these little goals in front of you. Cap City hosting at Cap City was a big goal of mine, and that's happened, a few times. I don't know. I'm going to New York at the end of the month to do some shows out there, so that's something that I'm kind of looking forward to. Who knows what that'll be like, but it's just these little things that come up. I have to remind myself all the time that I'm not even 6 years into this. I'm relatively young in this business, so it's like, who knows what's coming up.
Sure.
But that's part of the fun too.
And as somebody who does do a lot of studying of comedy, what is something that you're working on particularly these days? Man,
there are so many things I wish I could do. In terms of like, I wish, there are like show ideas in my head, not stand-up shows, but just like sketch shows and things like that I have in my head. I'm barely confident as a stand-up, so my sketch writing, whatever that is it's like a diary. Like, I don't want anybody seeing that.
But the imagery that you create through your stand-up sketch actually seems like something you'd be really good at.
I mean, I don't know. So as the more and more comfortable and confident I become as a stand-up, I know that eventually I will work my way into other things.
Yeah.
But again, it's like running a show, right? It's like, I don't want to put my fingers in 10 different things and be half-baked.
Yeah.
I want to be great at one thing. And if I can get that, then I'll move on to something else. But I don't want to be, I'm not as good of a comic as I think I should be.
Are you a perfectionist?
No.
Okay.
I don't think so.
Okay. Because somebody that says, I want to be really good at one thing before I dip my toe into other things, sounds like somebody who wants to be perfect at something before they'll allow themselves.
No, I don't think I don't think it's a perfectionist thing. I really think stand-up, I'm 33. So stand-up is really all I've ever actually pursued and gotten better at. And so I want to be as good at this as I possibly can be, because I'm not getting any younger And I don't want to, again, I just don't want to half-bake things. So I've set out, my feet are on the ground. I'm doing this. Mm-hmm. I've made a lot of sacrifices to make sure, to give myself as much opportunity as possible to make sure that this works out for me. Don't have a girlfriend. I don't have a bed. I don't have a car. I barely have a job. Like, all these choices that I've made to make sure that I have as big of a chance at making this a thing. I don't want to then take on 2, 3, 4 other things. I want to make this work. Mm-hmm. And if this can work, then the other things can work. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's like having like 4 cars in the driveway and like none of them run well. Yeah. It's like, well, I'll get the one running really good and I'll drive that one. And then, you know, on my off time, I'll work on the other 3. That's how I'm looking at it.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
So, I don't know. Maybe not the best way to look at stuff. There are plenty of examples of people that are great at all the stuff, but I'm not even a good comic yet, and I'm passable.
All right. Well, let's talk about a compare and contrast. Okay. What is your favorite thing about being a performer, and then prepare yourself for what's your least favorite thing about being a performer.
Favorite thing about being a performer is being part of a select group of people. I think stand-ups are like a weird bohemian punk rock crew. You know, this comedy thing is like a pirate ship, and we're all just like, everyone's got weird names, and like, I love the circus of it. Nobody's a normal person, and I love that I have found a place where I make sense. You meet comics all the time. You're like, you couldn't be anything else. Mm-hmm. There's no way. Yeah. I meet those, and I'm happy to be a part of something like that. That's my favorite part about being a performer. The least favorite part is, I would have to say, the insecurities that come with putting yourself out there as often as we do. Mm-hmm. Again, my confidence is always in question. I wish I was just blatantly flatline, like, I'm awesome. Yeah. And fuck anybody who doesn't agree. I oddly care a lot about what people think of my stand-up. As a person, I don't care. You can hate me as a human being, that's fine. But when my stand-up is brought up, it really bugs me. Yeah. And that's my least favorite part, is that I can't take, not criticism. I can take criticism. I love that. But when somebody suggests that I'm not doing well, or I'm not funny, or I'm whatever, I'll carry that for a week. And just like, oh, they're right. I'm not good.
Oh, no.
It's because I compare myself to people like Aaron and Mac. Yeah. I'm just like, I'm not them. You're right. You're right. I'm going to watch I-35 and see when the biggest truck comes through, and I'll find my way up there. Don't you worry about it. But yeah, that's my least favorite part.
Okay. Well, let's talk about something fun.
Okay, yeah. Suicide's not fun, man.
Yeah. There is a visual aesthetic, and it obviously is a part of your just who you are, and learning that you went to school to study painting and fine arts, and then walking in here and just seeing the visual presentation of albums everywhere. Now that I remember, VHS tapes everywhere. Oh, yeah. Just this Western type theme, but then it also but when you are on stage, you have a visual aesthetic. And every once in a while, I get the opportunity to talk to somebody where that's part of their thing, is how they wear their clothes. And I remember having this conversation with Ashley Overton, who very much, like, there's something to her style that she brings on a stage. And I want to get into that with you. So when I was in college, I experimented with just wearing a lot of weird stuff. I don't know why. I really can't answer the question as to why. As dumb and as, what's the word? Pretentious as that may sound, like, who knows, man? It's all part of the art. But I really don't
have any way to explain why I like to look a certain way. I just do. I'm a hugely visual person. I love the way things look. I'm a big flyer guy. When I see a bad comedy flyer, I don't get upset or angry. I'm just like, you could have done. There's so many. You could have done this better. Yeah. But when I see a great comedy flyer, I'm like, that looks sick. And I've always been of the belief if something looks great, the chances are it probably is great because they at least they knew enough to take the time to make that part of it good when they didn't really need to. You know what I mean? There are plenty of shows that you see that don't really have a strong visual presence or aesthetic, and it's great. But for me, dressing the way I do, it's fun. It's fun to do. Nobody else is really doing it.
Nobody could pull it off either.
Yeah. I call it the... what do I call it? Who knows what I call it? The Hunter Thompson phenomenon, where it's like, you look at that guy, he would wear like knee-high socks, Daisy Duke shorts, a visor, like he looked like a maniac. But because of who he is, you think it's cool. Like, look at him, he looks cool. So I think part of wearing whatever you want just is a matter of owning it. So now at this point, because I've worn so many weird things, I can wear whatever I want. And nobody really is going to be like, what is that? What are you doing? They're like, oh, there's Taylor wearing whatever he wants. Yeah. Stanhope is a guy that has a visual aesthetic and a presence about him. That's kind of a recent development in his career, but like he wears like the wacky 70s suits, right? JB Smoove is another guy that looks a certain way. He takes the time. Eddie Izzard is another guy. Those are the comedian parts of the visual aesthetic. Tom Waits is a guy who I admire on so many levels because he's incredibly intelligent, because he covers all the bases. He looks a certain way, and that's by design. He looks like that, sounds like that, moves like that, writes the way that he does. That's all part of being a performer. It's all part of, like... Tom Waits could go up there in jeans and a T-shirt and sing the songs, and cool. Yeah. But he took the time to put on a dusty 3-piece suit and a fedora and a half-lit cigarette hanging out of his mouth. That's all part of his thing. And I like artists that do that. Mark Bolan, David Bowie, Prince, like all these really, really cool-looking people take the time. Because we are we're performers. We're on stage. We're under the lights. People are looking. Nothing grosses me out or weirds me out more than seeing a comic go on stage with a backpack and sweatpants on. I'm just like, what a missed shot. What a missed opportunity. So I've kind of dialed it back because global warming. It's gotten hot, so I can't really wear the things I want to. But I got a whole closet full of just weird suits, and I began to put spikes in my stuff. I just like doing it. Yeah. It's just a fun thing to do. And in the stand-up comedy world, I mean, I'm not a big player, I'm just a local guy, but I wish there were more people that took the opportunity to try different things. Yeah. Look a certain way. And it's comfortable for me now. Yeah. I feel gross when I wear a T-shirt, believe it or not. I'm a button-up man for life.
Well, since this is a non-visual podcast, I will note that the boots that you're wearing, and they're probably not... What are those? Those are like... what do you call those? The half boot?
It's like a boot with a zipper down the side. Okay. That's not the technical term, I don't think.
It's an ankle boot, not a full, So they're very pointy.
They're pointy. I'm a pointy shoe guy. That's a Tom Waits thing, believe it or not. I've studied that guy so much. And I've noticed that he wears pointy shoes and pointy boots. And I'm like, well, that's what I'm going to do then. I'm totally unoriginal in every aspect of my life. I've taken bits and pieces from everybody.
But I will give you the credit for that whole visual presentation, because as you're talking about, I don't really know why I'm doing it, but it makes perfect sense with your style of comedy, because you walk up on stage and instantly people will say, people who don't know you will say, that guy's got a story to tell. And by wearing something unique and not,
that's another part of it too. It's like,
you're telling people a little bit about yourself before you even utter a word.
That's right. Yeah, that's a big part of it too, where it's like, whether you like my stand-up or not, you're going to remember.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that guy, remember that guy with the gold jacket? And like, I look back at Andrew Dice Clay's early specials. That guy went above and beyond. But when I watch those specials, I'm like, nobody in that audience forgot that show.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, you could question his stand-up and his material. That's all well and good. But the visual element of what he did, I mean, nobody forgot, man. And I'm not trying to like blast your eyeballs out of your head like, look at me. Mm-hmm. It's all very balanced. But I just think, if of all people, Jared McCorkle, before we were friends, we were leaving the Velveeta room, and he came up to me, didn't know me, and he said, you remind me of Tom Waits.
Oh my gosh.
And I was like, well, perfect. Yes, if I could be the Tom Waits of stand-up, I've nailed it. There are people out there doing it way better than me, but if I could be that would be incredible. So yeah, it's just like what I was trying to start doing at that time, people were picking up on it, or at least he was. So I don't know.
And that was one of the credits that I found, because I was a big Why Should We Care podcast. I love that podcast.
Oh, yeah.
And you did Tom Waits.
Yeah.
So, I haven't checked recently, but if that podcast network is still, posting, it still has the episodes available. People can go and listen to you.
Yeah. Really
advocate for
He's an incredible artist. He just is. Like, I don't know. I've always thought that blending music influences in with comedy influences, like you can be a purist comedian and be awesome, but I don't see anything wrong with, oh yeah, that guy really loves Bowie, huh? That's cool. Look at the way he's, I don't know. It's all very fun.
Well, this has been incredibly insightful, and you with that gruff, walls around you. Thank you for letting those walls down.
I mean, sorry if we've ever been in a public place and you thought, no, he doesn't want to talk to me. That's not it. Really, like, I'll talk to anybody, but So any apologies to anybody who's listening and think, oh, that guy sucks, he's mean. Or
now
whatever.
They'll understand why. A lot of people will think that and think, oh, well, he's just an asshole. But if they actually understand, because there's all sorts of personality types. There's the bubbly, I'll talk to anybody, but then there are the people that just, that's their personality, that they'll be a little more guarded.
I think the number one thing for people to realize, at least about me, is like, I'm out there grinding it too. Mm-hmm. I'm at the same open mics you are. I'm still emailing people to get on shows. Yeah. I'm still doing it. Like, there's no reason to... what's the word? Fuss about whether or not I'm a guy that can do something for you, because I'm not, and very few people are. So just be cool. I know that I come off as sort of prickly. I guess I've been called that. Yeah. I get that, and I'm working on it. But just keep in mind that like I'm a nobody. I'm just a local comic doing open mics. Like, I'm not a person. So,
damn it, Taylor! I want to end positive. Stop it.
Oh, I mean, I don't know. Orville Peck is a great person that you can check out. He's very bubbly and happy.
As we wind down, is there anything that? There might be one more topic. How am I doing on time? Okay, we're actually doing okay on time. Let me ask you one more question before we start winding down. All right, so you're visiting New York. I assume you're going to hang out with Jared. Say hello from us.
Yes.
Do you have any little bubbling of thoughts about the New York versus LA? You've referenced making bigger and bigger city moves.
Well, I've never been to either of those cities.
Okay.
I've only done comedy in like 4 states. So I have... anything I would have to say about those places is could be whittled down to no credibility. But I used to think that New York was the place that I would end up because I think aesthetically it works for me. But I have recently found myself looking at LA too. There just seems to be more things out there that I thought, that the things that I want are not in LA. They are. As far as which one I'll try to end up in, who knows? I may not end up in either. You know, who knows?
Yeah.
Probably if I'm going to say New York over LA. There you go.
Okay, we'll revisit in a few years and we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes. And
if I've learned anything from this, is you're going to study the hell out of both of them before you make a decision.
Yeah, I'm studying it now. I'll text with Michael Good and Jared and get updates. Like, what's it like? What are the mics like?
Yeah.
What are the comics like? Have you been to that place? You've been to that place? A lot of times they're like, no, man, I've been here a couple of weeks. Like, and I'm like, well, when you get it, when you figure it out, you give me the rundown. So I do try to like figure out as much as I possibly can.
All right. Fair enough. Okay, Taylor, I like to wrap these up with a closing question.
Okay. I am ready.
One word to describe your future.
Man, and I think the obvious answer would be mysterious or unknown, but I can't use that one, so let's see. I would say blindly confident. That's 2 words, but
We'll hyphenate it, and then that bypasses the rules.
there you go. I would say I'm far more confident about my future than I would have been 3, 4, 5 years ago.
Yeah.
I just feel better. I don't know. Yeah. Oddly, stand-up gives you like, at least it did for me. It gave me a sense of confidence about just not even being successful at stand-up, just being able to make certain decisions and follow through with them.
Right.
So I don't know. I feel confident.
And something from what you said earlier stuck in my brain, that one of the things that you learned about yourself is you thought that stories from your life were about being nostalgic and reminiscent, but the stories from your life are funny to other people because they're so unique and come from such a different background.
Yeah. It's interesting talking about stories from my life where it's like I've kind of like worked pretty hard at forgetting a lot of it, and then throughout, as you get older, kind of things remind you of like, oh yeah, something like that happened to me, and then I just tell it, and then people are like, wait, what? Hold on. And I'm like, oh, is that funny? And they're like, that's insane.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Sometimes you have to be taken out of your comfort areas, or where you grew up, to realize the absurdity of life. Yeah, and even further than that, it's like I kind of left it all behind, and now I feel like I'm telling somebody else's story. You know, where it's just like, oh yeah, that thing happened to that person that I'm not anymore. Yeah. And so it's for me more gratifying and easier to talk about because I don't have any emotional attachment to it. Yeah. So I can alter it, I can twist it up or just go straight into it. And people are like, wow, that's crazy. How'd that happen? I'm like, you know what? I don't even remember. But and then people get shocked that you don't remember those things. It's like, it wasn't funny at the time. Yeah. I'll tell you that. But yeah. Well, thank you for sharing your funny stories and the visually stunning interview environment.
Oh, yes.
Would it be okay if I just staged all of my interviews from now on?
You know what? $10 a month, it's yours.
$10 a month?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll talk off mic. We'll see if we can arrange that.
Yeah.
All right, so are there any projects that you want to promote or things that you want to talk about that we haven't?
Projects? Yeah, again, I'm mostly working on the stand-up. So if people are expecting something else from me, keep on waiting.
All right. Well, that is a wrap on Comedy Wham presents Taylor Dowdy. Tell us where we can find you on social media, and tell us about any upcoming things you want to promote.
I'm on Facebook. There's nothing to see there. Just me making weird updates. I'm on Instagram. I try to promote my shows I've recently started getting back on that stuff. Again, I was bad at that, which is weird because Instagram's completely visual, right?
Right.
So I got back on that. So I'm promoting the shows that I'm doing and things like that.
And you can actually see some of your artwork.
A little bit, yeah. In my early, I don't know. Again, that was when I was like, oh, Instagram, that's visual. Here's my visual stuff, and nobody gives a shit. So, yeah, a little bit of my artwork's on there, but not much. So yeah, I'm on Instagram. I don't do Twitter. No reason. I got into it too late, and now I don't know how to navigate it. When I log into Twitter, I'm like, I instantly turn 85. I'm like, wait, what? How do I do that? What does he mean? How do I get to that? And then I get frustrated and I just turn it off. So I don't do Twitter. Gigs, I host 2 monthly shows, and the next ones are January 9th. We're going to be at Spider House Ballroom with Andrew Wagner, and that's our UFO-themed comedy show called Beamed In. Lineup is unannounced as of now, but they're always fun. They're great shows. Ron Leckler, local comedian, funny dude, always does a crazy sketch on it. And then that following Friday, January 10th, I'll be hosting a solo show that I've been doing for over 3 years called Ground Floor, and that's at Hotel Vegas on East 6th Street. And that one is always great. Always packs out. I'm really proud of that show. Yeah. I'm really happy that it's gotten to the point where it has. But that's where I'll be.
Very cool. Okay, so for the uninformed, what is a UFO themed show?
Weird story. Maybe 2 or 3 years ago, I got approached by a music friend of mine who had a studio stage space in his backyard, which is like a little tiny house that had a little stage in the corner. He said, would you want to do a comedy show there? And I was like, yeah. Let me think of a theme, and kind of like, again, the visual is the first thing I think of. So I was thinking of the flyer, and I hit up a friend of mine and said, so this is the show. It's a little house in the back of it's a tiny little house in somebody's backyard. So he sent me a flyer of a UFO beaming down on top of a house. And I just said, well, that's cool. Beamed in. Well, let's just call it that. And that show never came together. And so when Spider House came back with comedy shows, and I was approached to, do you have an idea for a show? And I was like, I think I do. I was going to do this show with this flyer. And they're like, oh, is it UFO themed? I'm like, it wasn't supposed to be, but let's see what I can do. So it's very loosely UFO. Yeah. None of the material that the comics do, we didn't dictate to them, like, hey, you've got to write alien material. But so doors open at 8, shows at 9. So for that hour, I found a 1.5 hour long UFO footage compilation. So that's playing while people are walking in, and the stage lit all green. We give out UFO themed toys to the audience. And Ron Leckler, who I mentioned before, plays a character called Bob Lazar. And Bob Lazar is a real person. He was a scientist who claimed to work on UFOs at Area 51. He's not a crazy person, but so we bring Ron on to be Bob, and he tells us his monthly updates about what he's been working on. So that's kind of like UFO themed in quotes, but
that's very good. So for the skeptics who might think, okay, this is too weird.
Is Alex Jones going to be there? He's not. He is not going to be attending.
That's a good thing, I think.
Yes, I think so.
All right. Well, we hope you've enjoyed learning about how Taylor got to be the comedic genius that you heard today, just as much as I have. This has been Comedy Wham Presents Taylor Dowdy. I'm Valerie, and that's been funny. Thank you, Taylor.
Thanks, Valerie. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.